Thanks for coming in to speak with Central Coast newspapers. Councillor suspended Chris Holstein.
I thought it was councillor dismissed, but yeah, whatever you want to call it.
No, you haven't quite
no
been
longer
dismissed.
to be a councillor.
That's right. Look, before we get on to your long past and history in council on the Central Coast, you just pointed out there was 1991 when you first entered.
That was when I was first elected, yeah.
But if we fast forward to this last 12 months, and so much has happened, what's your analysis now? You know, you're an independent council. What's your analysis of the things that really contributed to the downfall of this council, where we are now?
I don't think you can put it, and politically they'll try to throw responsibility in one basket or another. Looking at it subjectively, there were 5 things. It's not a good analogy, the perfect storm, but it was 5 things that I think contributed to where council is at the moment.
What are those 5 things?
Firstly, I think the initial administration of council coming into the amalgamation was lacking in a number of ways. It was there to enact the government's fit for the future. It was there to establish that foundation and to get us well positioned to move on and amalgamate as a council. But I think it failed in a number of ways, and primarily I thought it was because the 2 harder questions, the difficult ones, the ones with conjecture or what were found to then be substantial in cost, that'll be deferred and we'll let the councillors deal with that. And that wasn't the right decision. They should have had a better basis before they brought the new council in. So that's 1. 2, I think, was the state government and their fit for the future. There was a total underestimation of what would be needed for a council, particularly of this size. Remember, 6th largest council in Australia. Yet it didn't put the necessary resources, systems, procedures into place to allow their council to amalgamate. So they take a level of that responsibility. That's number 2. Number 3 was the management, and probably impeded by a range of issues, the foundation not being there, the funding not being there to move forward, but also the impediments of, well, no one was going to be sacked, we were going to have that natural attrition, but you know, they needed things done beyond, and they started then increasing elements of staff, not always knowingly to the councillors, but the management. And how did we get to a situation of professionals? And let me tell you, I have and hold the officers in local government in the highest regard. That's slipped a little bit now because something has gone wrong in the systems and procedures and the reporting processes that has put us to this point. Now, I'm not going to throw stones, but things didn't work, things weren't reported, things did not happen that have allowed the officers to get to a point that their use of restricted funds was such that it was unlawful, without the councillors' knowledge in the initial stage, and there was mistakes made there. So there's a management's the 3rd point. The 4th point has been the councillors themselves. The ability of those councillors to work as a team. Now, I've had 30 years experience in local government. I've had councillors that were dyed-in-the-wool Labor, dyed-in-the-wool Liberals, radical Greens, fiercely independent and all of that. But in every instance, when we would have discussions and there was issues on the board, we would compromise and come out with an outcome that would be in the community's interest. I'm sorry, in the last 3 years, it has been more motivated by politics or self-interest and not necessarily a good compromised outcome. And I can give you plenty of examples. I can give you the issues with, let's take our stadium. I'm very proud to say was part of bringing the stadium together. But a lot of argument around the time, arguments coming from the bowling club, arguments coming from various community groups. Me and Brooksy had some very interesting conversations, but we all came to compromises. We would not have the stadium we have today had everybody stood on their digs. But at the same time, we resolved and needed to know that, look, we've got a great vista there. Don't ruin it by putting a grandstand in front of it. Keep the palm trees, keep that heritage item, which was Malcolm's big thing, the heritage of the palms, leave it open at that end and make it a horseshoe. We compromised, we got it, and I think you've got one of the best regional stadiums in Australia sitting down there because of compromise. This council, the one we've just been through here, could not compromise. It was black or white, and that was it. And nobody sought or nobody could get any resolution. It was too politically and self-interest motivated. So the way we acted as councillors was a contributing factor, number 4. And number 5 has to be beyond anybody's control, but those things that I had in 30 years experienced: fire, flood, drought, coastal erosion, and even pandemic. Somebody asked me the other day, was COVID here before? I said, no, the pandemic was the Newcastle disease, where we had to put the mountain in a bubble, where we had to close down roads. People couldn't come in, go out. We had car check stations 24 hours a day. We actually devastated the livelihood of many of the poultry farmers. And whilst that was bad enough, I was mayor at the time and had to deal with upset families, because it wasn't just the poultry that was destroyed that had to be put down. It was also the pet budgies. It was the cockatoos that sat on that back veranda and was virtually a family pet, and they had to be euthanized, and that was extremely difficult. So we've dealt with the pandemic, but all of these, I've never seen in such a confined space. If you had to say, let's have the testing of natural disasters, we had them all.
In the 1 year, you really...
Virtually in such a short period of time. And people don't understand. When you have a fire happening, when you have flood happening, when you have events happening in your community, your average Joe in the street, there'll be discussions about the federal government doing this and the state government doing this, but it all comes back to local government. They're the first responder in so many incidents that happen within our community. They are the closest and have the greatest impact on the community. And that impact comes at a cost, a huge cost to council. And I don't think that was ever properly addressed and foreseen in what council had to do with that. Nobody was going to change those issues, but they were impacts. And that's the 5th of the 5 things that I think have put us where we are today.
Well, that paints an interesting picture from someone who's been both on the inside and in the community for so long. When we glance forward now, the Minister, Shelley Hancock's made a decision that we'll have a public inquiry, continue the suspension of councillors, and a likely administration period that may stretch for 1 or 2 years, maybe more. What are your feelings about that?
It's evident to me that the councillors, this group of councillors, aren't going to work together for a number of reasons. Self-interest, political direction, political interest, it wasn't going to work. So I have no difficulty with the council being out to September. And there was nothing to be achieved. But beyond that, you cannot leave the community unrepresented by elected reps. September comes, they should have an election. Hopefully, the parties, the people with the potential, the people that are committed to their community are going to be putting their hand up and standing. But you need to bring back that democracy, that local representation. 95% of what I did as a councillor wasn't sitting down at a council meeting. I wasn't going to a briefing session. It was when I was out Saturday morning doing the shopping and somebody would pull me aside. It was the phone ringing at any time of the day to say, hey Chris, I've got an issue. My neighbour's put his fence up and I don't think I think he's encroached on my boundary, what do I do? There's some potholes down the street, is council going to get to them? It's making that representation. People want to have somebody to talk to. When I first started in council, one of the old councillors pulled me aside just as they were going out, we were coming in, and he said, the CEO of that major company up the road who wants to talk to you because he's got an issue is just as important as Mrs. Bloggs, who's the secretary in a local office when she's got a problem in her street. Give them the same attention, give them the same respect, because that's the issue on their plate. That's the biggest thing to them. Don't dismiss it. Don't brush it off. Talk to them on the issue. You may well disagree with them at the end of the day, but let them be heard. Now, at the moment, council has that great system called ASK. rightio. I think it's missing a few letters because I'd call it something else. I don't think it's giving to the people what they want, and that's the ability to touch base with somebody. And I think that's the one thing that Shelley's done wrong, and I'm surprised. The Minister has been in local government, I know she knows that, and it would have been a hard decision. But that decision should have been out to September and beyond then, pull an election together. And I say in that election, there's a few things need to change. And some of those things that need to change is the attitude of the political parties, the self-interest groups. All of them need to reconsider what you're putting people in there for. Make them well informed. I've got to tell you, there was councillors came into this council I don't think understood what their responsibilities, what was needed of them, and the impact that being on council brings to you. You lose a certain element of your life. And my wife and my 5 kids will back that up, how it changes your life. So they needed to be better informed, better aware. And, you know, religion and politics come second to your community. By all means, we all have a slant. Now, Dave, I'd know probably you'd be certain elements you'd be really lean more to Labor aspects or some environmental aspects, but also you understand the business side of it. So you'd probably be around it, but everybody has. I was conservative nature. I put my hand up and had a crack and did my stint with the Liberal Party. Only once I got in there I found out that wasn't my cup of tea and it wasn't going to work for me. And that's not to the detriment of the Liberal Party. I think that was the format of what state government was about. It wasn't me. Council was more community focused, and because of my previous involvement from 91 and the flooding and all of that, I think I held it a little bit different. That wasn't me, and I realised that. But unfortunately I've come back into a council that's gone in a political and self-interest direction and moved away from community.
But so let's go back 1991. You entered Gosford Council as a councillor. You've been mayor several times during the period, and you've been the state member for Gosford as well for that period of time. I mean, that's an incredible bit of history. What are some of the highlights while we have you here that you'd like to punctuate us with?
So the things that I'm very proud of, there's a large big picture items that you can see, and I feel old now because some of those things that we worked hard on are now coming to their use by date, and they're renewing them. I remember with Dr. John Irvine about the playground down at Yamina, redeveloping that, kids interacting, an open play space and that. Great times. That's about to be renewed. God, I'm feeling old now because the things you started are now changing. And the other things were that strike home to me, little things. Every time I drive through Wyoming and the Renwick Street roundabout. Now, you may not have recalled, but getting out of Renwick Street was an absolute nightmare for the people of Wyoming. But everything I drive by, I go, we did that. We helped. You never did anything on your own. You had to have consensus amongst your councillors, and you had to have support, be it state Labor or state Liberal, be it federal Labor or federal. You had to have help to get things. So, that I see. Things like the Olympics and the stadium and the Olympic torch relay that came into the stadium. Never will that capacity of the stadium ever be breached to what it was on that night, with 20,000 people in the stands and 5,000 kids on the field, dressed in the colours of the Olympic rings, dressed as cockatoos, kangaroos, koalas, kids dressed as chips that the seagulls came in and collected as we put on a show that was unbelievable. And I remember them saying one of the best regional celebrations, and I still have the little certificate from John Coates and them on the wall at home, saying this was one of the best celebrations we ever had. So the little things like that will probably not be remembered by everything. Holding billy cart derbies with James Chatfield, who drew Ginger Meggs at the back on Henry Parry Drive. The little things, walking backwards through Woy Woy, Spike Milligan's celebrations, and meeting Spike's daughters and Desmond Milligan, his brother. Desmond's no longer with us. But those little things which brought our community together, worked on so many, and I've met so many great people who have been within the management of council, community reps. We touched there earlier on Alan and Beryl Strom. There have been legends in this community and contributed. And to have been not guiding it as much as part of it, to having an involvement in it, I'm very proud of. And I'll have those memories. I just hope that I can see a future council focusing more on their community rather than their self-interest or political interest.
Well, that's a lot of wonderful wisdom and memories as we look around the Central Coast, the southern half particularly. What are you going to do now, Chris?
I've been working on. I have a few part-time jobs. One of them's just concluded. An organisation that I hold near and dear, the Regional Youth Support Services, have been great. The leadership over all the years with Kim McClory and their board there has been outstanding. Well, we're involved in moving them into their new location when they had to move out of Parkside. So the involvement with them, getting up, the bus project, Comic-Con and all of those, very much. But I've concluded my time there. I'm back doing 3 days a week, and I'm looking at social enterprises and community connections and things with Coast Shelter, another organisation that is Central Coast based, does such a wonderful job in respect to addressing the needs of the homeless, but addressing the issues of domestic violence here on the coast. It's an organisation you would hope that didn't need to exist, but it does and it has to, and we are better for having it here. So I'll spend my time until the wife tells me to pull pin and go and retire. But
I can't imagine you retiring, Chris.
I don't believe in retirement.
Yeah.
I think retirement's when they nail the lid down, mate.
Yeah.
I think you just go to a worse paid job. So I'll keep my interest. I still hold patronage in a few associations. Hold patronage with the likes of the JPs, Justice of the Peace. I hold patronage with the Vietnam Vets and Peacekeepers Association, things that I'm very proud of and things I will continue to support in whatever way I can. And there's a few new entities out there. There's a group called Home on the Central Coast, which is about trying to find housing for those people with an enduring mental illness. I see lots of examples of mental illness and what comes from that with addictions and alcoholism and a range of things, and you see them in Coast Shelter from the people affected there that show up there. But for people who endure a mental illness, ever since, what was it, in the 70s or 80s, trying to remember the report now, it slips from my mind, but when they started closing down those institutions, rightfully so, there was never any fallback. So we have people enduring mental illness that are supported by family and friends. They need to have housing. And there are examples in Melbourne and Queanbeyan, and we need one here on the coast. We need a complex that will allow independent living, people with enduring mental illness, with 24-hour support if needed, and that has to happen. And with some very dedicated people, Josh and Neil, we're trying to see if we can't move that, get it on the agenda politically, and if I can in any way support them to get that happening. But I'll find other things. I've got 7 grandkids and 5 kids, mate. They're keeping me bloody busy.
Yeah,
so yeah, but you don't shy away from your community in any way you contribute. What a great spot to live.
Yeah, it is, and look, thanks for taking the time to coming into the Central Coast newspapers and talking a little bit about your legacy. And I hope you still maintain your role as a commentator on things, because the council thing won't go away. There's obviously a lot of experience in there. So, thanks for providing some wonderful stories over the years.
Mate, there's some somebody said you should put them into a book.
Yep.
But probably got to wait for a few more people to pass on off this mortal coil before I could actually write them down. There's some great stories, some interesting ones, and there's some, it just makes up that what we are. And people appreciate where you live, appreciate what you have. And for any new person who wants to be a councillor, look, I don't care what your politics are, I don't care what your religion are, but keep your community to the forefront And stand up if you disagree, by all means, but also be prepared to compromise to get an outcome for the community. Any of those things I mentioned that have been constructed, even the smaller issues, they were because we compromised to get an outcome for the community betterment. You can't stand on your digs. It's not that simple anymore.
Well, that's a wonderful way, an appeal to finish off on. Thanks, Chris Holstein.
Thanks, Dave.